My goodness, to be living in South Africa right now, it's a lot like being caught in the middle of a hurricane. But today I want to talk to you about the two distinct but very opposing versions of South Africa that exist at the very same time. And I think it's so important that we familiarize ourselves with both versions of South Africa. The first version we know well. It is the chaos, the madness, and everything in between. But the other side is either often overlooked or simply forgotten about. And like I said, for us to live with a bit of peace, we need to know that both exist. We simply cannot ignore either side. So let's take a moment to talk about the version we know very well. Right now, South Africa is in quite a spot. We have a government that simply isn't capable or competent in running the country in a meaningful way. There are a bunch of statistics that we measure on a daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly basis that prove this. We know, for example, just the high levels of corruption that are rampant in this country. There is the crime rate that just continues to soar in the wrong direction. You have unemployment that statistically keeps getting higher and higher, and we know that our economy is in a really tough spot, not only because of the pandemic, but because of decisions that our government has made over 20 to 30 years. And then there is the state of our infrastructure, which just seems to keep declining. Things like load shedding is on the increase. I remember when we were appalled at the idea of having to endure stage 2 load shedding, but we haven't had stage 2 in months. Now we get really frightened when there's stage 6, but we're okay in stage 4 and delighted when there is stage 2. If you look at things like water cuts becoming more frequent. I live in the northern suburbs of Johannesburg. It has become far too common for me to get home and not have water for the entire day. And I actually live in quite a privileged position. And then last but certainly not least, and to keep this video brief, you have the state of our roads. But like I said, this is the South Africa that we are all very familiar with. And it is very frustrating for us to live in this version of South Africa. And I think an important point here is that we should not deny the very real state of where South Africa is in this regard. But the other version, I think, is the one that is so important to remind ourselves over and over again. And to talk about that version, I want to bring in one of my favorite topics in the form of travel. So over the last 6 or 7 months, I have been touring South Africa endlessly because of a brand that I started called Like a Tourist. I often tell people that my travels throughout South Africa have actually helped me heal my broken relationship with this country. And it is the perspective here that I want to share with you. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. In the last 6 months, I have traveled all over the country, across every province that we have. And the thing that comes to mind every time I travel is just the sheer beauty of South Africa. If you ever take the time to get into a car and road trip around the country, the natural wonder that you drive through across this country, it is very hard to beat. But of course, beauty alone doesn't really cut it, does it? It is the people of South Africa that I think is its most distinct feature. I happen to live in London for about 2 years. And one of the things I noticed traveling across London to South Africa and return was just how friendly our people were. I have this theory that goes something like this. Don't quote me on the exact figures, but hear me out. My theory is around the idea that 1% of South Africa is filled with incredibly bad actors and apples. So I would put government in that category, but I would also put certain criminals and generally corrupt people. But this is not the majority of South Africans. Everybody else is so friendly, is so kind, and is just wanting to figure out how to be better. So my thinking is that you have the 1% bad apples, but on the other 99%, this country is filled with the most incredible people. In fact, I would go one further. I think that what's happened in the last few years is our country has been held together by the many NGOs and good people who have become active citizens. People who have not waited for government to fix things, but have decided that it is up to them. And more of these people show themselves each and every day. So on my travels, I first get into the car and I'm driving through these beautiful landscapes. But then I'll stop to have a bite to eat. And in the middle of nowhere, I'm sitting at a tiny padstall, and the waitress greets me, who's probably earning near minimum wage. She's struggling a lot more to keep her head above water than I am. But she greets me with a smile. There's a whole bunch of warmth in her voice and her tone. She's friendly and she's kind. And she is not alone. I have come across so many people like the waitress I'm simply referring to. In fact, every single small town and big town that I go through, I just meet swarms of these incredible people. They greet you with a smile. They make your day better, even if their day isn't going so well. They want to make you happy. And I think this is the epitome of the South African spirit. I think this is the South Africa that I'm talking about. And what happens to us is because of all the madness, the load shedding, the crime, and everything that I mentioned earlier, life can bog us down. And I think this is the problem that what we're doing. We are conflating two South Africas into one. But I'm here to tell you that while we shouldn't ignore or shouldn't pretend that the bad version of South Africa exists, and we really should be calling out our government, we really should become active citizens more often, we really should focus on the things that we can control. On the other side, I'm simply trying to remind you that a very beautiful version of South Africa exists. A South Africa that is not only beautiful to the eyes, but its people is its crowning glory. And that is the South Africa that I'm very proud of. So when you're going through a hard time, when you're dealing with load shedding, I want you to remember that this beautiful country of ours, filled with the most incredible people, also exists. And these people on the other side are equally frustrated. This is why I don't believe in positivity so much, but more optimism. Positivity oftentimes resembles this idea that we must be up all the time, that everything must be perfect, that we must never consider the bad. I don't believe in that. I believe in optimism, which is the idea in my mind that things may not always be great in the present, but that the future will be better than the present. And I think a movement of this country is swelling up. I think that for the most part, the 99% of South Africans who are really good people, these South Africans are starting to get incredibly frustrated with the system. And they're starting to do one of two things. Either they're starting to become more vocal about the bad side of South Africa and what they don't like. And I think that these South Africans are actively starting to take to the streets to do what they can to make the country better. I know for sure that you cannot sustainably have the large majority of a country be such incredible people and have it ruined by such a small group on the other side. And so my encouragement to you is to remind you that these two versions of South Africa both exist. And we have to do whatever it is that we can to remind ourselves of the better version of South Africa. We would be foolish to deny its existence. It is real. The beauty of South Africa and its people truly exists on a daily basis. And if you open up your eyes and your heart to look for it, you will see it every single day. This doesn't mean that we should ignore the bad side. It doesn't mean that we should accept what is happening in our country. I just don't think it's good for us to conflate the two South Africas into one and call this place a shithole. Because despite our shortcomings, this place is filled with the most incredible people who want to see South Africa fulfill its potential.